There's only food for real family members. The words fell like knives across the dining room. There's only food for real family members here, my mother-in-law said coldly. In front of me sat an empty dog bowl. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. I stared at that bowl, porcelain white, polished, reflecting the chandelier above, as if the entire world had shrunk into that humiliating circle. My hands trembled slightly, my throat burned, but no sound came out. Across from me, my father-in-law sat stone-faced, chewing his food slowly, his eyes fixed somewhere far away. It was as if none of this concerned him. Beside me, my husband Win fidgeted in silence, pretending to straighten his napkin rather than face what was unfolding. At a table set for 4, I had never felt so completely alone. The people I thought were my family, the people I had helped, supported, and respected, were now the ones degrading me. My mother-in-law leaned forward, a mocking smile curling on her lips. Don't act like your family just because you've given us a little financial help, she hissed. Her voice dripped with venom. I could only stare at her. My mind raced back to the months I had spent running errands for her, carrying groceries, cleaning her floors, wiring money each week just to keep the peace. I had done it all because Win had asked me to, because I believed that's what family did. But now, in this moment, I realized that what I had considered kindness, she had seen as weakness. Her tone grew sharper. Even a dog has more charm than you. The words hit harder than I expected. The laughter that followed, hers, light and triumphant, echoed through the room like a cruel melody. I looked at Win, silently pleading for him to say something, anything, but he only looked away, his expression tight with discomfort, annoyance flickering in his eyes. And that was when it sank in. He wasn't embarrassed for me. He was embarrassed by me. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Every tick of the clock seemed to mock me. The birthday cake on the table stood untouched, its candles flickering weakly, melting into waxy puddles. What should have been a joyful family celebration had turned into a quiet nightmare. I'd had enough. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the polished floor. I understand, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Since I'm no longer family, I'll stop everything. My mother-in-law raised an eyebrow, smug. Oh, finally showing some sense. Win's eyes widened, but he still said nothing. That silence, the silence of the man who promised to protect me, was louder than any insult his mother could throw. That night, I packed my things. My name is Demi. I'm 30 years old. When I was 21, my parents were killed in a car accident. That day, my world broke apart. I remember sitting in the hospital corridor, clutching my younger sister's hand as she cried. I couldn't cry with her. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Someone had to stay strong, and that someone had to be me. We had no one else, no grandparents, no close relatives, no safety net, just an insurance payout and the modest inheritance my parents left behind. Those years after their death were hard. I was still in college, juggling classes, part-time jobs, and endless paperwork. The grief never fully went away. It just buried itself under exhaustion. I graduated, got a job, and dedicated myself to supporting my sister. She was 3 years younger than me, still in university when I started working full-time. Every paycheck I earned went to her tuition. Watching her walk across that graduation stage was one of the proudest moments of my life. Last year, she got engaged to her college sweetheart. I remember her smiling at me and saying, "It's time you thought about your own happiness too." She was right. I was turning 30, and while my career was stable, my personal life was empty. I had spent nearly a decade working, saving, surviving. I wanted something more, a home, laughter, companionship. So, I began attending matchmaking events. Most were awkward, polite conversations that led nowhere, until my third event, where I met him. Win. He had a gentle smile and an easy laugh, a mid-level employee at a mid-sized firm. Nothing flashy, nothing pretentious, just kind. From our first conversation, we clicked effortlessly. 6 months later, he proposed. It all felt like a dream, a gentle, quiet happiness I had been craving for years. But the dream began to crack the moment I met his mother. She was elegant, poised, and had the kind of sharp eyes that seemed to cut straight through you. When she learned I worked for a smaller company and didn't hold a management position, her smile turned patronizing. With a company that small, your salary must be quite low, she said sweetly. How difficult for you. And with no parents to rely on, well, I suppose you're lucky to marry my son. I still remember the way her lips curved, as if she were savoring the insult. Win had intervened, apologizing for her behavior. That day, his kindness had comforted me. He even promised, if Mom ever says anything like that again, I'll protect you. I believed him. I truly believed him. But soon after, his mother began calling me almost daily. Demi, you're free today, right? My knees hurt. Come help me with some errands. At first, I obliged. She was family, after all. But the errands multiplied: cleaning, gardening, laundry. Before long, I was spending more time at her house than my own. When I finally tried to set boundaries, she turned cold. Well, then, she said, if you can't help me physically, you could at least help financially. That was how it started, her asking for small amounts at first. 200, then 3. Each time she said it was the last. Each time, it wasn't. She began calling twice a week, always when Win wasn't home. Don't tell him, she'd whisper. He'd only worry. Over 10 months, I sent her nearly $1,000, money she claimed was for medical expenses, but each time I saw her, she looked perfectly healthy. When I brought it up to Win, he brushed it off. She's getting older, let's just help her a little more this month. That little more became a habit, and that habit became expectation. Until the night of the birthday dinner. Until the dog bowl. That night changed everything. I walked out of their house and out of that family for good. Win followed me home later, still pretending to be the victim of everyone's disappointment. When I told him I wanted a divorce, he simply sighed. Maybe it's your fault things got this bad, he said. You should have tried harder to get along with Mom. He didn't understand that I had tried harder than he'd ever know. I left my house keys and the divorce papers on the table. Before walking out the door, I said, tell your mother she doesn't have to worry. Since I'm not family anymore, she won't get another dime from me. And as I closed that door behind me, I finally felt free. Free from the lies, the guilt, and the illusion of love. That night, we came home later than usual. His expression was uneasy, the kind of look people wear when they're torn between guilt and fear. He sat down across from me at the dining table, rubbing his hands together nervously. I'm sorry, he began, his voice low, but could you please do as Mom asks? For a moment, I couldn't believe what I'd heard. I stared at him in silence, waiting for an explanation that might somehow make sense. When I asked why, we hesitated, avoiding my eyes. Then, almost sheepishly, he confessed something he had never told me before. When I was applying for college, he said, Mom lent me money. Dad didn't want to send me to a private university, it was too expensive, but my grades weren't high enough for public ones, and I really wanted to go to that school. Mom convinced him by saying she'd help pay using her own savings, so she covered the tuition, and I promised to pay her back one day. I blinked, processing his words. You mean, you still owe her that money? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I never really repaid it. Things got busy after graduation, and then I started working. Every time I brought it up, she told me not to worry about it, but I can tell she hasn't forgotten. I think that's why she's been so persistent with you. His voice softened as he leaned forward. Family should help each other, right? You're part of my family now. Please, Demi, just this once. I'm asking you. There it was, that mix of sincerity and guilt that always made it hard for me to stay angry at him. I could feel my frustration melting into reluctant sympathy. I sighed deeply. All right, just this once. His face lit up with relief. Thank you. Seeing his smile, I forced one of my own, but deep down, I felt a heaviness I couldn't shake. Something about this arrangement didn't feel right. Of course, just this once turned out to be anything but. Once my mother-in-law realized she could extract money from me, it became a routine. At first, she'd call once every couple of weeks, always when we wasn't around, and talk in that same sweet, pitiful tone. Oh, Demi, I hate to bother you again, but the hospital bills are just piling up. You wouldn't believe how much medicine costs these days. But over time, her tone changed. She stopped sounding apologetic and started sounding entitled. This month's been tough again. You know, I'll come by this afternoon to pick it up. She didn't even ask anymore, she told me. Then, the calls started coming twice a week. Sometimes, she'd even text me the exact amount she needed. It was as if she'd set a personal budget that included me as a source of income. Last month alone, I'd given her $900. This month, it had already reached $1,200, and we weren't even halfway through. Finally, one evening as we and I sat down for dinner, I brought it up. Your mother keeps asking for money, saying it's for hospital bills. Does she have any serious condition? We didn't even look up from his plate. I wonder, maybe you should ask her directly. I've asked, I said, trying to stay calm, but she always changes the subject. Do you know what she's doing with all that money? Because this month it's already over $1,000. He shrugged. I'll ask her sometime. But he never did. Whenever I brought it up again, he'd give the same dismissive answer. Just let it go. Demi, it's only this once. Only this once. Those words had become meaningless. 10 months passed this way, 10 months of me handing over money to his mother, pretending everything was fine while resentment quietly built inside me. And then came the breaking point. It was early spring when my mother-in-law called with an unusually bright tone. Demi, we're having a little celebration for your father-in-law's birthday this weekend. You and we must come. Her cheerfulness was unsettling. Normally, her calls were full of complaints or subtle demands. Still, I decided to accept. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally improving between us. On the day of the dinner, I put on a simple blue dress and accompanied we to his parents' house. When we arrived, my mother-in-law greeted us with a wide smile. I put extra effort into cooking today, she said proudly. It's been a while since we've all eaten together. The dining table was set beautifully, the dishes steaming and fragrant, like something out of a magazine. But as I glanced at the place settings, something immediately struck me as wrong. There were 4 seats, but one setting stood out. No plate, no utensils, no wine glass. Just an empty, silver dog bowl. My breath caught in my throat. I thought, for a moment, that it had to be some mistake, but then I saw her smirk. Demi, she said sweetly, that's your seat. My knees went weak. What are you talking about? She leaned close, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Quickly, sit down before your husband notices. But we had noticed. He just chose not to. He walked past me, sat down in his own seat, and picked up his chopsticks without saying a word. A cold numbness spread through me as I sat in silence. My mother-in-law smiled triumphantly. I've only prepared food for real family members, she said. That's natural, isn't it? Her words hit me like a slap. You shouldn't act like family just because you've given us a little financial help, she continued. Who do you think you are, questioning me every time about how I spend the money you give? A little financial help. Over $10,000 in 10 months, and she called it a little. Then, with a cruel grin, she added, someone as charmless as you should be grateful to even be treated like a dog. I sat frozen, the humiliation burning through me. At that moment, my father-in-law walked in. He must have heard her, but he didn't even glance at me. He simply sat down and started eating. Well, my mother-in-law said cheerfully, clapping her hands, now that everyone's here, let's start the party. That was it. Something inside me broke. I stood up. I'm leaving. Oh, leaving already? She mocked. We didn't even look up. So this is what you've become, I said, staring at my husband. You pretend not to see your mother's demands, her harassment, her cruelty. You do nothing, because it's easier, because you're her obedient little dog. We finally looked at me, but no words came. I left before I could see his expression. Several hours later, we came home. He didn't speak, didn't look at me, he just walked past, heading for the bathroom. I can't take this anymore, I said quietly. If this is what marriage with you means, I want a divorce. He stopped mid-step, turned slightly, and said in a flat voice, okay. That was it. No argument, no emotion, just a tired sigh. He sat on the sofa, scratching his head. Since this is the end, he said, I'll tell you something. Isn't it partly your fault things got this bad? You kept coming to me for advice instead of handling it yourself. As a wife, you should have dealt with Mom directly, woman to woman. I stared at him, stunned. So that was it. He hadn't cared at all. My pain, my humiliation, it was all just troublesome to him. I felt something inside me go cold. Quietly, I began packing my things. When I finished, I left the house key and divorce papers on the table. I'll come back for the rest of my belongings later, I said calmly. And since I'm no longer family, tell your mother she won't be getting a single cent from me ever again. Ah, wait. But I didn't wait. I walked out the door without looking back. For the first time in years, I felt free, terribly, achingly free.